We're always manifesting. My mind was like a landfill when I first started. I had no money, no resources. People made fun of me. If you adopt the Thought Snob lifestyle, what you're doing is you're living with mindful awareness. When you can manage your emotions, you can absolutely conquer anything. One of the main that I used to create a whole other version of myself and a whole other life was...
What inspired you, Paula, to develop the Thought Snob process, and how has it personally transformed your life?
Well, it came from my upbringing, and where I was raised played a significant role in developing Thought Snob. And I was raised in a rural poverty pocket where, no one has enough of anything. And it's not just money. I mean, when you live in poverty, you just don't have enough of anything. And scarcity absolutely dominates the mindset of that whole cultural landscape. And most people never escape poverty, and they never get what they want, and they settle for that. And there's no way they can even fathom getting what they want, much less someone else doing it. It's just the way they believe. And research shows that people who are raised in a poverty environment share one commonality, and that's that they expect defeat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And although I was not directly raised like in poverty, my parents were. They were raised in like the deepest, cruelest poverty that you can possibly imagine. So they unknowingly passed that poverty invaded mindset onto me. They wanted what was best for me, but what they thought was best for me wasn't. Their idea of my life was for me to just take any job and just to earn money, because that was the only way to earn money, was just to work in a job. And maybe you're probably going to hate it, but that's what you've got to do. And that's what they had always had to do. They had to survive. And I was always a big dreamer. I wasn't like the other people around me. I always wanted more. I wanted luxurious things, and I wanted to travel abroad. And I was curious about stuff like astrology as young as being like the second and the third grade. I was very curious about that. And that was considered the devil's work. And so all of my thinking was just way, way, way out of the box. And it was a lot more than people could handle, because I was completely out of the norm. And so when I would talk about those things, I was told that I was getting above my raising. And I was told that so much that I believed that wanting a wealthy lifestyle or wanting better than what I had, I was led to believe that that was wrong. I was also led to believe that I wasn't capable of getting those things. And then if I talked about it too much or took the dream a little bit too far, I was called a stuck-up snob. And so those conversations really rang in my ears when I was working on my book. And at the core of everything that I teach in my book here, Thought Snob, involves viewing yourself and how the world treats you from an opposite perspective of what you were taught to believe about yourself. Now, when most of us do that, we realize that we adopted a bunch of lies as beliefs, as absolute truths. And that's really what messes us up. And so snobs have been like, historically, these people we don't like, and they're ruled by ego and material things, and they judge a person's worth based on their tangible assets. And so nobody wants to be a snob. But I put a spin on this and turned snob into being something a person aspires to be. Mm-hmm. And snob, again, stands for see new objective beliefs. And so if you see everything objectively versus subjectively, you won't be as influenced by opinions. And opinions are not facts. And if you can look at the facts about yourself and move forward from there, then you are going to be more likely to get what you want. And that's where Thought Snob came from.
What would you say is the difference between a Thought Snob and a thought snob. And how can like shifting one's mindset change someone's life?
I'll kind of start answering this question by saying that if you adopt the thought snob lifestyle, what you're doing is you're living with mindful awareness. And when you behave mindfully daily, you will eventually rewire your brain to believe the good over the bad. And the repetitiveness of interrupting like this crazy stream of racing thoughts by questioning the truth about what you're thinking tells your subconscious mind a more empowering story. And since our subconscious beliefs control like over 90% of our behaviors, our daily behaviors will eventually create pleasant experiences, abundance, better health, and supportive relationships. If you've been living like a thought slob for, decades, like I did, then you've been choosing self-loathing over anything better. And that's what slob stands for. Self-loathing overrides better. You never get what you want and you settle for that. When you do that, you're self-loathing. And when you consistently choose what you don't want because you feel like you don't deserve better or can't obtain better, you're self-loathing. And thought snobs always choose better. A thought snob it's like an archetype that has all of these qualities that you've admired in other people, but thought that you didn't have those qualities, yourself. And so that's why we're really actually drawn to certain people. It's because we have those qualities too. It's just harder to see those in ourselves than it is in other people. And that's one of the ways that our intuition speaks to us. And so the people that I've always admired, I realize now I admire them for a reason. It's because I also had the same qualities that they did.
Yeah.
And so you're able to identify those qualities within yourself and unlock that inner wisdom so you can own and use your power. And that's what changes your life right there. And everyone has that power, but it's like math. If you don't use it, you lose it.
In your book, you talk about the challenges that come with self-transformation. What advice do you have for someone who feels like the world is falling apart right now during the process? Because I would say it's bound to, isn't it? That's part of the process.
That's usually what happens first.
Yeah.
If you've been living, let's say, as a thought slob your whole life, with me, I lived that way until I was about 28 or 29. And well, I was still a thought slob when I started this self-empowerment, transformation, or spiritual journey, or whatever you want to call it. I was still behaving and thinking like a thought slob, but I had to erase like all of that in order to completely revamp my entire existence. And it took a lot to do that. And so when I was a thought slob, I had created this world that was full of toxic people, bad experiences. I couldn't even have like a pleasant experience at a restaurant. And it was so consistent that people laughed about it because it was funny.
Yeah.
Nothing panned out in my favor. It just didn't. And so my whole life, my whole physical reality had to be dismantled in order for the life that I wanted to come to fruition. That's why things fall apart. And it can be absolutely brutal. And when you're in it, and maybe you lose all of your resources, maybe you lose your home, maybe you go through divorce, maybe friendships just start to just break off and end. All of that usually has to happen in order for you to move up and get to where you need to be, especially with people, because not everybody is meant to go with you to the next level, and not everybody can take you there. And the people around me could not do either of those two things. If anything, they were going to keep me swimming in quicksand. So when relationships end, it can really, really be painful, and you have to make a lot of tough decisions, and it can be really confusing. But if you can find opportunities amid all of that uncertainty, because when all that's going on, it's a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty is this feeling that nobody is really comfortable with. But if you can look at uncertainty through like, if you can look at it objectively, look at the facts, when everything is uncertain, then that means that nothing has really been decided. And so anything can happen. And when you feel like your world is falling apart, if you practice that level of mindful awareness, you're going to be way less likely to react to your current circumstances. And instead, you're going to ask yourself, well, is it possible that this situation, could pan out in my favor? Well, the answer is going to be, yeah, it is possible. It is absolutely possible. It just may not pan out the way you think it's going to. It usually pans out better.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you can also, during that time when the world is crumbling, if you can find opportunities to learn and grow and then apply that wisdom to improve your situation, well, you're operating with a high level of emotional intelligence right there. And it's
Mm.
all connected. The mindful awareness increases your emotional intelligence. And I always say that emotional intelligence will take you so much farther than a high IQ. And it can be learned and cultivated. And I continue to strengthen mine every single day. And when you operate with a high level of emotional intelligence, you're no longer jumping to worst case scenario
Yeah.
because you're looking at the facts. And when you do that, then you choose an energy frequency that matches good. So if you're focused on good, but you're surrounded by bad, well, the bad stuff's got to go. And that's not always pleasant.
It's like imbalanced, isn't it?
Yeah.
What role would you say emotional intelligence actually plays in terms of manifesting the life we desire? And how can people actually cultivate these traits?
Your level of emotional intelligence absolutely determines the quality of your manifestations and the quality of your life. Because what that boils down to, emotional intelligence is being able to manage your emotions in a healthy way. And going into my spiritual journey, I had zero emotional intelligence. I'm telling you, zero. I fell apart over everything because that's how I was taught to be. I was taught that I was supposed to react to everything. I was supposed to get offended. I was supposed to be jealous of people that had more than me or whatever. And that's really, that's a total complete pitfall, period. But especially with manifestation, because we're always manifesting and people get confused about that. A lot of people think that you only manifest what you want. Oh no, you manifest what you want and what you don't want. And when you manifest what you don't want, then that means you are just behaving mindlessly and you're creating all this stuff that you don't want and you don't realize what you're doing. When you behave that way, then you're not mindfully aware. You're not self-aware. You don't have a strong level of emotional intelligence. When you can manage your emotions, you can absolutely conquer anything. Anything. Like that's the key. That's it. Because we attract what we are. Like attracts like. I mean, that's like the most basic definition of the law of attraction manifestation. And so if that's the case, if we're going around upset all day long and we're bitching about so and so did this and so did that and we're woe is me and everything's turmoil, okay, but then that's connected to like an energy frequency that matches financial trouble, sickness, relationship problems, toxic work environments. I mean, you name it. And when I was in that frequency, I stayed sick. I broke bones often. I developed this rare bladder condition called interstitial cystitis. My relationships were terrible. I struggled with my weight. I was, obese at one point, 204 pounds. And so if you take a look at that first part of my life and you compare it to the second part, really, there are no similarities.
Like two completely different people.
Two completely different worlds. And that makes me think of the quote that I heard Wayne Dyer say,
Yeah.
changed everything. And he said, hostile people live in a hostile world, loving people live in a loving world, same world. Well, same world, but it's like two different lifestyles, totally. And it all started here. I had no money, no resources, no support. If anything, people made fun of me for what I was doing. All I had was here. That's it. That's all I had. And I was scared to death. But looking back on it, that's all I needed.
I think people need to wake up and come to the conclusion that you have everything you need at this time.
Yes,
A lot of people, they feel like they need more resources and so on, but everything you need right now to get to the next stage, you already have it.
you have it.
Many people, they struggle with self-esteem, limited beliefs, and instilled from their upbringing. And I know you struggled with a low self-esteem at one point. That was around when you put on weight from a size 6 to a 16 when your parents had a divorce.
I mean, I went into that without any self-esteem anyway. I mean, I went into it not feeling good about myself because, and you know, in my book, I call my upbringing, you know, a downbringing, because when I started thinking about it, nothing anybody did, and I'm not just talking about my parents here, I'm talking about all my agents of socialization. It was just the norm in that part of the country to for women to not be built up. Everything brought me down, and I was taught that I was powerless, you know, not powerful. I was always taught that someone else was in charge of my life, and someone else was going to dictate my time and dictate what I did, and I was just not this empowered decision making person. And so when you're taught to believe that, how could you possibly have any kind of self-esteem or self-confidence or even think about reaching, you know, that level of self-actualization? And so when they went through their divorce, it was, whew, I mean, it was brutal. It was brutal. And of course, you know, I was very young, but I would tell people I felt like that I had been divorced but never married because I was right in the middle of their divorce. And my father got into a relationship very, very quickly. Like he moved a woman in and her daughter a week after my parents' divorce was final. And the daughter was kind of close to my age. And he moved her into my bedroom and started calling her by my nickname.
Oh, wow.
As somebody whose brain isn't fully developed, they're 17, 18 years old, this is going on. It messed with me big time.
Yeah, it's too much to process. It's traumatizing.
It was traumatizing. I was getting ready to say my mom and I were both traumatized. But
Yeah.
we didn't realize that because nobody talked about mental health. And so it was just a really tough time. And I didn't do well. I didn't do well at all. And it was like my mindset was so like sloppy. I mean, that's where when I was thinking about, you know, Thought Snob, I thought, you know, it was like I was just like, it's just like a slob. I mean, everything was just slobby and it was all here. I mean, I just let anything in my brain and I just accepted everything I heard about myself as the truth when it was really the furthest thing from the truth, the things that I was told about myself. And in my book, you know, I teach people how to do what I did. I had to rewire my brain and start telling my subconscious mind a different story instead of all the horrible negative self-talk that I had engaged in for almost, you know, the first 3 decades of my life. And when I changed my thoughts and I changed the way I talked about myself and other people, then my physical reality started to change.
Telling yourself
Yeah,
over and over again how amazing you are, it really shifts your brain.
absolutely. Absolutely. And what I didn't know early on in my spiritual journey is our subconscious believes whatever we tell it. And
Yes.
that's how positive affirmations work. And people think they're cheesy. And people get it confused with positive thinking. And I don't advocate for positive thinking. I don't think that anybody should ever force themselves to feel a certain way. That's not good. It's not healthy, and it causes people to repress their emotions, and that's not good. But positive affirmations, the more that you say something and the more that you think something, the more likely you're going to believe it. And when you believe that you are wealthy, healthy, powerful, you know, whatever it is that you want for yourself, then your energy is going to catch up and you're going to create that in your physical world. And I remember the first person that I really learned about positive affirmations with was Louise Hay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember standing in that tiny, tiny little bathroom in this house that my mother and I lived in after my mom and dad divorced. And I was standing in the mirror because Louise Hay advised to do, mirror work, say your positive affirmations in the mirror.
Yeah.
And I did not have a penny to my name. I was surrounded by terrible people. Life just wasn't good.
Mhm.
But I had gotten this vision of what I wanted, and it matched with the affirmation, I am wealthy. And I still remember the first time I said it, standing, looking in the mirror. I remember saying, I am wealthy. And it was like cringe. I mean, I would cringe when I would say, but then I just started saying it every day, and I started writing it down and writing it down. And I would just write. And then, what do you know? One morning, I woke up and hey, that was true.
Yeah, it's so powerful. That's why we have to be so mindful of what we constantly tell ourselves.
Yeah.
So mindful. What do you believe is the secret to unlocking personal happiness, abundance, and self-love? And how can someone start tapping into their greatness today?
I think it really does depend on the person and what their background is and how they already feel about themselves going into a transformation like this. But like overarching, the absolute best thing that I could recommend would be to engage in something every single day that makes you feel good, because you always got to keep in mind that like attracts like. And so if you feel bad day in and day out, I mean, we all have off days, don't feel well, don't sleep well one night or something, don't feel good. One day you're not in a danger zone of feeling bad for one day or 2 days or even a week or 2 weeks. It's when it carries on for days and days and days, it turns into months and months and years. You feel bad like that consistently, you're going to create a physical reality that resembles hell on earth. And so your number one goal should be to do something to make yourself feel good. And I'm talking about like sustainable feeling good. And the best way that we can all do that is to do something that releases inflammation from our physiology. And operating out and about every day in society causes stress. And, acute stress, that's normal, totally normal. You get stuck in traffic, you have an argument with somebody, you get a little stressed out, but then the minute the situation is over, you're okay. That's normal. We're all going to have that. It's the chronic stress that's the killer. And that's what turns into inflammation accumulating in your body. And inflammation, if it's not released, will turn into disease.
Yeah.
It's at the root of every disease known to man, almost every disease known to man. So releasing inflammation is incredibly important. And that's something I wish that somebody would have told me way early on in my spiritual journey. And there are many ways you can release inflammation from your body. And I recommend meditation. You can do breath work, anything that activates your parasympathetic nervous system. You need to turn that parasympathetic nervous system on, turn that sympathetic nervous system off as much as possible, because there's no reason why anybody on God's green earth in 2024 should be staying in fight, flight, or freeze all the time. And that will make you feel awful. I've been there. I know.
Likewise.
And when I started doing the practices that turn my parasympathetic nervous system on, things changed, man. And it changed fast. It was a miraculous change.
Life is so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make that choice to see life as being amazing. Everything that we go through is taking us towards our greatness, but we
Yep.
have to go through that process in order for us to reach that destination.
Absolutely. And not usually change, although it can be hard and unwanted, if you really think about it, change is like the best thing ever. Because if things don't change, then you're just going to live the same life day in and day out for 90 years. And that's not really living. And so I learned to embrace change a long time ago. And I want to add a little something in before we close out. I've got some little nuggets of wisdom here. And I would just want our listeners to know, one of the main that I used to create a whole other version of myself and a whole other life was envisioning. And when you can see your way out of something, you can get out of any situation that you're in. And brain studies reveal, this should motivate people. Brain studies reveal that thoughts produce the same mental instructions as actions. And so if you have nowhere to turn and you have no money and you have no support, say you've lost your job, you've lost, you're just in this terrible place. If you can find it within you to take it up here and think about what it is that you really want and see yourself living the life that you really want in your mind's eye, your brain is interpreting that as the truth. So there's no way, if you do that consistently, that you will not create the life that you want. And it takes some people longer than others, because some people have more garbage in their subconscious than others. I was one of those people. No judgment here. I say that my mind was like a landfill when I first started. So it can take some time, but if you do it, if you stick with that consistently and you envision what you want every single day of your life, you're going to build momentum. You're going to get excited about it. It's going to happen. You're going to get excited about it. And that enthusiastic frequency is what will take you out of that deep, dark energy and into a place that is way, way, way better. Brain science, you can look it up.
Amazing. You're absolutely incredible, Paula. The fact that you're so vulnerable, and that's something that I really love about you, and that really made me gravitate to you.
The vulnerability piece of it, that's where it's at, because I thought back to my younger self.
Yeah.
Thought, what is the one thing that I needed? What did I really need?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I needed support because I felt very, very alone in the beginning stages of that journey. And my beginning stages lasted a few years. And so I just decided to, I'm just going to tell it the way that it is. And that way nobody will be intimidated to learn. I'm totally relatable. And when you're intimidated to learn something, or you feel like that somebody is superior or smarter, or they can do something better than you, you're probably not going to follow that person. And I ran from a lot of those spiritual gurus because the content was so over my head that I became frustrated. And any kind of little learning curve at that time, well, I would just give up. So that's why I wrote Thought Snob the way it's designed, so that anybody can start using the tools and the concepts without any learning curve whatsoever. No intimidation, period. It's not over anyone's head.
Yeah.
And it's very, very relatable, because my stories are their stories. I've been through it too. So
we all have. Yeah.
Thought Snob is not, it's not all fun and games. And your transformation starts after, you read the first chapter, it's already started. Yeah. And by the time you get to the third and the fourth chapters, you're getting in pretty deep. And so I lightened the mood when you least expect it with humor. And when I was reading all those self-help books, and ultimately never underestimate the power of a self-help book, because they changed my life. There's no doubt about that. But that component wasn't there. That's why I tell those stories throughout the book, and they're all true.
Amazing.
Unfortunately, they're true.
You're so wonderful. Paula, how can the viewers and the listeners, how can they grab their copy of Thought Snob?
So Thought Snob, the Modern Spiritual Playbook for a Better Life, is available on Amazon. And it's in 3 formats. I got a paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. And the audio book is like a whole other experience from the book. It's funny, and I narrated it, and I didn't really want to do an audio book, but I was talked into that. And but it's really funny, and it contains 6 bonus stories that aren't in the book or like the Kindle version. And so you get those bonus stories with the audio book. And I mean, people love the audio book, but it's set up so that you can journal, like the paperback, you can write in it. I've got like journal prompts. There's a lot of quizzes, a lot of questions. And so if you get the audio book, you might want to get, a piece of paper to follow along, or however you choose to do it. I am going to do a workbook to accompany the audio book, because so many people are loving the audio book, but then they're missing the journal component. So I want to fix that somehow. So it's available on Amazon. And then I've got a podcast, the Thought Snob podcast, and it's all about healing. I bring in experts from all walks of life. And it's designed so that when each episode, you leave the episode in better shape than you were when you tuned in, because you're going to leave with something that you can use to improve your life in some way without having to spend any money. And it's just all about healing head to toe, not just emotional, physical too.
Thank you ever so much for joining us. If you haven't already done so, grab your copy of Thought Snob on Amazon. You can also purchase it on Kindle. Paula Swope, absolutely incredible lady. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And I'm excited for everything that lies ahead. It's incredible how things have just developed over time. You're doing everything that you said you set out to do, and it just says a lot about you. You say something and you get it done.
Yeah.
Thought Snob mentality.
Just go for it. It's like, just freaking go for it. It's like the only time age matters is if you're on your deathbed, 90 years old, in some frail body, and you're thinking, God, I wish I would have done that. That's the only time age matters. And so I do not want to leave this world with any regrets. That's what the first part of my life was for.
Well, I'm sending you lots of love. I can't wait to see you in person. Seriously.
It'll happen.
It will happen. Definitely make it happen.